It's the Metro on 101 WDET, 101.9 WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, a local nonprofit is working to welcome immigrants and train them in the culinary arts. We'll talk about how that work came together with the Patchwork Culinary Project.
Plus, Detroit is a majority Black city, but that's not reflected in the journalistic leadership around the region. We'll talk with one of the people who's helping to make a change in that space.
And that is happening right now. Because the media industry, specifically news media, has historically been led by white men. That matters because the stories that the media portrays have shaped the way people perceive Detroit, Black people, and people of color. And those portrayals have deepened systemic racism. I'm thinking about the civil rights movement and how some Southern white journalists tried to stifle progress on that front, and how these same news people printed inaccurate stories about Black folks or ones that found them guilty for crimes they didn't commit. While some journalists push for the truth, the damage has been lasting and continued in different ways. Our media partners, Outlier Media, founded by Sarah Alvarez, and WDET's former employee Candace Fortman, announced that the Outlier newsroom will be led by Erin Perry. Perry is a Detroit native and longtime journalist, and Perry has worked at Outlier since 2021. She is also a practitioner scholar and uses her knowledge to make journalism more accessible. Joining us now to chat more about the new role and her goals for the publication is Erin Perry, PhD. Erin, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And you are a Detroiter through and through. What part did you grow up on?
Oh, northwest side of Detroit, directly on Outer Drive between 6 and 7 Mile. Yeah. It rolls off the tongue.
Yes. They say 7 miles the better mile. I heard somewhere before.
I won't get into that argument.
Exactly. We'll start that now. But, give us just a little more background about you. Who is Erin, and why did you get into journalism?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the question. Again, raised on the northwest side of Detroit. I am the youngest of three in a blended family. My each parent brought a kid to the marriage and then had me. I am a graduate of Cass Tech, of course, and later went on to Hampton University of Michigan, and Wayne State University. I'm married. I've been married to my husband of 14 years. We have a 9.5-year-old son and a 6-year-old very slobbery boxer. But I've worked all over the country. I've lived in 2 other countries because of my husband's career. We lived in Mexico. We lived in Brazil. Please don't test my Portuguese or my Spanish. But, so I've had a diversity of living experiences around the world.
Indeed, which also just brings you a worth and a wealth of knowledge in terms of the things that you've been able to collect and bring back to the city of Detroit and what you were able to spread with the city of Detroit. So, just being a Black woman, being from the city, what does it mean leading the editorial direction of a publication?
This is something that I used to dream of, right? I say that I've been running around the Detroit Free Press since I was 15 years old because I started in the high school journalism program there at the time, and I would see people in these big roles, and they seemed almost unattainable. So to be in that position now is like, wow, how did I become the auntie in the room? How am I here? But alas, here we are. But, I'm ready. Like I said, I've been in journalism for a very long time. I've seen things that I want to continue to see, and I've seen things that I don't want to continue to see. And so, that's the beauty of any job, is figuring out what works and what doesn't. So I'm really excited to be at the helm now to take Outlier into its next chapter.
Yeah. And Erin, what are some things that you would like to continue to see, positive things that you would like to see, especially in newsrooms here in the city of Detroit? And what are some things that we can definitely improve on or just get rid of?
Yeah, that's a great question. Outlier's stance is that our goal is to fill information gaps, right? If there is a small amount of harm to a big group of people, we want to make sure that we are on that story. If there is a large amount of harm to a small group of people, we want to be on that as well. And so our goal is to put people first, but that's not even just the people who we cover. That's the people who are actually producing the journalism, right? And so we work very hard to keep burnout at bay, because when you don't do that, people leave the profession. And we want good people to stay in the profession so that they can continue to produce the stories that matter for the people that we're here to serve. And so, one of the goals that I want to do for now, we're building, but we're also just going to maintain a lot of what it is that we know that we do well. One of those things is to really increase our connection with the people who we serve. And the reason why we do that is because that's how you get people to trust you. That's a big trust factor, is having people at the helms who look like the people of the city where they are. And so while we are not a monolith, Black people are not a monolith, it does help when you have people who are leading a newsroom who have some of the same experiences. So someone who might be able to recall taking, the DDOT bus to whatever their DPS school is, and maybe understanding some of those challenges. We need people like that in the newsroom. We need people who have had some of the same childhood experiences, like going down the giant slide. And, I remember this slide not being this fast, or I remember it being faster, and ending up with the burns by the time you made it to the bottom. Or, the folks who were able to say they rode their bikes on those mile roads that we were just talking about, and, made it home before the streetlights came on. So those shared experiences, that matters. And what that means is that you will have people in the newsroom who are inclusive of voices that they know that matter. And oftentimes that's because they know what it means to be excluded. And so that's one of the things that we will continue to do well.
And if you're just tuning in, we're chatting with Erin Perry, the new editor-in-chief at Outlier Media, a local media outlet here in Detroit, also a partner of WDET. And actually, we did have a really cool question here. Robin, if you want to throw that in there. It just explain a little bit more, because Robin and I were talking about diversity in the newsroom. And just, if you can, Erin, go into that just a little bit more and talk about why diversity matters so much.
Yeah. When you have diversity in newsrooms, you often have people who are staunchly pushing for underreported stories that are about these important issues that other news organizations may not necessarily be paying attention to. So we're looking at things like hard to find resources for parents of children with autism, or, we're making an effort to really follow up with the resident who messaged in to our SMS and to Text Outlier to, say that they've been locked out of their building, and they've had to put their rent into escrow for 2 years because they can't figure out, who owned it. And so we're going to be the kind of newsroom that continues to really push for answers to those questions. And then, when you don't have diversity in newsrooms, that's really ripe for unequal treatment for the other professionals who are working there, and especially, professionals of color. And we see that happen when there's, unequal enforcement of newsroom rules. So again, I always go back to the people who are doing the work. We're going to make sure that we're taking care of journalists in Detroit, some of whom have experienced trauma in their professional lives. And we want to make sure that we're caring for those people so that they can bring their best authentic selves to work every day.
And speaking of that, Erin, of caring for those folks and helping them to bring their best authentic selves, I mean, you are encapsulating what a great editor-in-chief does, but often something that many of us have not experienced. Could you talk a little bit about some of the ways you want to be the best version of an editor-in-chief that you can be?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. So I would say, I want to make sure that Outlier is being for its community what we want the community to expect of us. And so what I mean by that is we want to be trustworthy and transparent, so we will be trustworthy and transparent. We will let people know why we may not be covering international conflict in a certain way,
Sure.
Or how we will cover international conflict in a certain way, because it affects, people who are within our readership area. I want to make sure that we are connecting people to the resources that they need, and I want people to really take full advantage of our accessibility. And we're still paying attention, right? So right now, it makes sense for us to have, text outlier where people can message into 67485 and speak directly with the reporter if that is their need. But we also understand that there may be other needs that will come out eventually. And so we'll be making sure that we are evolving with our readers as their needs change. And the way to do that is to make sure that we're consistently asking them about their greatest challenges and what they need, so that, we can continue to be as responsive as we already are. But I want to make sure that we are kind of flexing that muscle to make sure that, we're growing with our readers as well. And also, hopefully, I say that we have kind of a love-hate relationship with people in power.
Yeah,
They love us because they know the work that we're doing is good and is necessary, but, they kind of hate to see us coming because we don't let up. But I'm hoping that, we will get people who are proximate to power really to really overextend themselves, to serve the people who they have signed up to serve.
That's right.
And we're going to keep pushing for that, so that Detroiters can feel as empowered as they deserve to feel.
And just speaking of Detroiters, being a native of the city of Detroit, being in this position, you talked about it just a little bit beforehand and earlier in the conversation. But, just to kind of close it all in, being from the city of Detroit, you're now editor-in-chief at Outlier Media, but you are also in connection with Orlando Bailey, who's right there with you. So, just having this leadership, Detroit-led leadership, Detroit Black-led leadership in Outlier Media's newsroom. Can you just talk about the significance of that and how you see journalism evolving because of it?
Wow, it's a big question. I think that with two Black leaders on both sides of the house, what you will get is people who truly care, and people who are just really down for Detroit and making sure, again, that Detroiters are feeling as empowered as they deserve to feel and to be. If you are not down for Detroit, if you are not down for Detroiters, we may not be the news outlet
That's
for you.
right.
It's
here.
like, right. It's kind of like, I don't know if you guys remember that old clothing brand FUBU was like, for us, by us.
Yeah.
We are for Detroit. Okay. And so, we're going to do the things that trigger questions in us, so we're going to explain what's confusing about this election ballot. We're going to co-host the forum with a crowded field of 22 school board candidates, to see what they have to say about chronic absenteeism. We're making speculator names, household names in this city. But, at the same time, we're also hanging out at, Detroit coffee shops once a month and buying coffee for whoever walks through the door, so that we can talk to them face to face and hear those challenges. We're hosting events that highlight Black political power, and we're posting up at internship fairs at Wayne State University. Right. But, one of the things that I love about Outlier is the Detroit Documenters Program.
Yes.
So, we are training and we're paying people, emphasis on the paying, right? We're paying people to learn how to work with us, how to gather information, how to share that information about all of these local and regional and state government decisions that are taking place. Sometimes behind, semi-closed doors when those doors should be open.
Exactly.
But we're pushing for that, right? And so I think that's a glimpse of what you can expect and what we'll continue to do when you have people who are from the city and have had those shared experiences that I talked about earlier today, because we know a little bit about what Detroiters need and what they want.
Erin Perry is the new editor-in-chief at Outlier Media. She takes over for Sarah Alvarez, who is now editor-at-large of Outlier Media. Erin, thank you so much. We really look forward to working with you in the near future because you are our partner here in the media landscape. So talk to you soon, Erin.
Talk to you soon. Thanks for having me.
It will be sunny with a high near 77 degrees, one of our last warm days. Wednesday, mostly sunny, 68 degrees and a little windy. Gusts could reach almost 25 miles per hour. Thursday, we will see more sunshine with a little bit chillier of temps at 56 degrees. Friday, a chance of rain and a high of 62 degrees.
Former President Barack Obama's campaign for Vice President Kamala Harris ends in Detroit today. Harris held an event in Royal Oak with Republican former Congresswoman Liz Cheney yesterday. Once again, Robin, we talked a little bit about this in the newsroom about how Michigan is just this huge battleground state.
Oh,
We're
my
just
goodness.
seeing
It's wild. I mean, this is my first time living in a swing state in 15 years, and the texts, the phone calls, the blocked off streets for Kamala and Trump. Yes, it's been wild.
It really has. And it's also been wild with the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy.
That was a very nice segue, Tia Graham. Lawyers for the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy's former chief financial officer have asked a judge to delay his guilty plea to wire fraud and money laundering. Prosecutors say William Smith stole money from the group to pay for personal luxuries.
Tisk, tisk, tisk. Coming up, November elections mean more than just a vote on the president. They also mean voting in local elections. Next, we'll discuss a proposal that would financially impact Detroit public schools and explore how board elections could shake up that school district. We'll hear that from Robin herself coming up next. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. It's a pivotal time for Detroit Public Schools Community District. The results of the November election could change the makeup of the school board as over 20 candidates vie for 3 open seats. If they're elected, new board members could disrupt the current harmony on the board, and they could make it more difficult for Superintendent Nikolai Vitti to achieve his goals. There's also a ballot item, Proposal S, that would make a huge financial difference for the district if voters approve it. The proposal would pay off the school district's debt and help make new investments. Earlier this morning, I spoke with Superintendent Vitti. We started by discussing Proposal S.
I think most Detroiters feel that as the city is just starting to see an improvement economically, and, with that improvement in city services and an improvement in the school district, there's still this underlining feeling that businesses should contribute more with their improvement in the city and their profits in the city to the city's overall improvement, accelerate that improvement. And I think Proposal S is certainly a way to do that. So in the state of Michigan, every school district is required to tax at 18 mills. That tax is mainly a business tax. But because the city economics have improved over the past couple of years, more revenue is being generated. With that revenue, there's been a rollback on the mills from 18 mills to 16.6 mills because essentially you're generating more revenue because property values have increased. On the surface, that sounds harmless, but to the district, it's a loss of revenue of about $10 million a year. So by reestablishing the mills at 18 mills, It ensures businesses pay their fair share in the city's overall improvement and the district's improvement. The district will generate $10 million more dollars in revenue each year. That money is completely flexible and fungible, and it will mainly go to continue to increase teacher salaries and improve facilities, because general fund dollars through this proposal in particular is the only way you can pay teachers. You can't use federal funds to do that.
But first, the money will be going toward the legacy debt, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So Detroit, we're still paying two sets of debt, if you will. There's an 18 mil debt, and then there's a 13 mil debt, which is that homeowners are paying based on a construction bond in the early 2000s. So we're just about done paying off the 18 mil debt. That'll be done by actually March of 2025 next year. But we still have quite a bit to pay off on the 13 mil debt, but we're able to accelerate that payment by passing this proposal.
Now, something I've heard you talk about a lot during school board and committee meetings is the fact that Detroit public schools are not equitably funded in comparison to other districts. How inequitably funded are they?
In Michigan, every school district is required to tax at 18 mils. And so back about 2 decades ago, something called Proposition A was passed by the legislature. And the positive part of Prop A was it created a floor in per pupil funding. So it guaranteed that in Michigan, regardless of where your child grows up and where they attend school, that at minimum they will be provided a certain amount of dollars for their public education. That minimum amount this year is about $9,608. And so every district taxes at 18 mils. Once they collect that tax, if they're below $9,608, then the state makes up the difference in state aid, so that it ensures a floor. That's positive. The negative of this formula is that if you generate more than $9,608, you keep those dollars. So districts like Ann Arbor, Birmingham, Farmington, Romulus, River Rouge, Troy, West Bloomfield are examples of districts that generate more than $9,608. Specifically, Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, and Southfield, if you average those three, they actually generate $3,464 more dollars per student than Detroit does. And as we all know, those districts border Detroit. So this creates great inequity in that those districts not only have more per pupil than DPSC does, but those dollars are completely fungible, flexible, so you can apply them to anything, from teacher salaries to facilities to sport programs to after-school programming. And so this creates a big issue for us when we're trying to recruit and retain mainly teachers, special education teachers specifically. But it's also about programming for students.
Dr. Vitti, I'd like to shift our focus before I let you go and discuss one of the most pressing issues that's facing Detroit students and many children nationwide. I'm sure you know what I'm about to say. It's chronic absenteeism. The numbers tell us how dire the problem is. Roughly 65% of Detroit public school students missed more than 10% of school days last school year. Tell me about the ways the district is trying to address this problem and what more you think needs to happen more broadly.
Yeah, I would say it's one of our greatest challenges, and I name it as one of our greatest challenges because what we're definitely seeing in DPSCD is an improvement in student achievement. When you look at state test scores, we're improving, especially since the pandemic, at a faster rate than the state on average, even suburban school districts. And when you look at our performance versus large urban school districts throughout the country, we're improving more in that above grade level performance since the pandemic than those districts as well. Our challenge is chronic absenteeism. When DPSCD students miss 18 or fewer days, they're actually 3 to 5 times more likely to be at and above grade level in reading and math and to be college ready defined by the SAT in 11th grade. So attendance matters because it is directly impacting student achievement. So we're improving, but we need to accelerate that improvement with even higher numbers. And I think the best way to do that is by improving attendance. As you mentioned, last year, 65% of our students missed 18 or more days of school. That's actually an improvement since the pandemic, but we're still not at levels even where we were before the pandemic, and that's a challenge across the nation, not only in DPSCD, but our way of working on this is, one, creating more awareness about attendance. I think a lot of our families, especially those with younger children, still think it's okay to miss, let's say, a day of school once a week or once every 2 weeks. So just trying to change the level of awareness and understanding of how absenteeism affects achievement. But beyond that, the greatest challenge that we have in DPSCD is concentrated poverty. And what that means is that we have families that are working multiple jobs. They're trying to just get through life, and life issues are getting in the way of coming to school every day or prioritizing attendance every day. So DPSCD, through philanthropic funds, excited that we have already started to implement our health hubs throughout the city. We provide free medical, dental, vision, mental health support. We also have family resource centers where we're providing canned goods for pantries or through pantries, uniform help with evictions, help with immigration services. These are all ways to address the concentration of poverty issues that our families are facing that leads to high levels of absenteeism.
You'd like to see fundamental change to the way Detroit schools are funded on multiple levels. Is there any other way you see to address this big disparity?
Well, one is greater flexibility with federal money and state grants. The state did, for the first time, after heavy lobbying, created some flexibility with what's called 31A money, which is given for at-risk concentrated poverty. And so we are now putting some of the flexibility into teacher salaries with our most recent agreement. So that's a sign of progress and one step in the right direction. But more than that, we got to get to a point where we're not talking about a floor with per pupil funding, but a ceiling. What is the right ceiling? I believe the right ceiling is placing it on the wealthiest school district, which probably would be Bloomfield Hills, at $13,443 per student. And so that all districts are minimally funded at that level, which would be the new floor. That would be one way to solve this. The other way to solve this is to move to a weighted student formula where students in concentrated poverty, English language learners, special needs students receive more per student than the average student.
That was Dr. Nikolai Vitti, Superintendent of Detroit Public Schools Community District, discussing how the district may change come November and the inequality that exists between Detroit Public Schools and suburban ones.
Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Coming up, Americans aren't the only ones closely watching what happens in our national politics. Our neighbors to the south and north are waiting to hear what happens next. We'll talk about what American politics means to Canadians. You all stay right there.
Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. The U.S. presidential election is just a few weeks away. And while our focus is usually on how the election will impact us here in the United States, our neighbors to the south and north in Canada are also watching the race between former President Trump and Vice President Harris closely. So closely, in fact, that Canada's national broadcaster, CBC, teamed up with public radio show The Middle and WDET to host a live call-in special from WDET. It happened this Sunday. It was a whole orchestra. Beautiful to see. It was hosted by Jeremy Hobson from The Middle and Ian and Ian Hanumansing, host of CBC's nightly news program, The National. Last week, Stephen Henderson spoke with Hanumansing about the relationship between Canadian and U.S. politics.
Let's start with just some basic understanding of the way in which our politics here in the United States affect things in Canada. I don't know that most Americans spend a lot of time thinking about it. We certainly think about it more here in Detroit because of our proximity to Windsor and to Canada than other places. But I'm not sure many Americans really consider the way that our politics affect or are reflected, I guess, in ways in Canada. So spend a little time just educating us about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that your listeners should know is that every single major news organization in Canada, so my network, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the Toronto Globe and Mail newspaper, I mean, I can go on and on. Any news organization that considers itself an important news organization, whether in English language or French language organization, has at least a correspondent in Washington, D.C., and likely has a team. We at the CBC have a team. And quite often our newscast is led with a story from Washington. You know, every time we do that, there are some people who say, because our national newscast is called The National, and they'll say, wait a second, how come The National in Canada is leading with an American story? But for the most part, that is what happens. And so politics in the United States is something which is very closely watched by Canadians and paid attention to. And then beyond that, the things that happen in the United States culturally, in terms of sports, to an extent, a lot of Canadians judge success in this country by how Canadians do in the United States. So, we just had a big documentary on a rock group called the Tragically Hip. And one of the themes in that story was, although they did really, really well in Canada, one of the best-selling bands in Canada in their heyday, they never really were successful in the United States. And in that portion of the documentary, the members of the band, the surviving members, got really grumpy and said, well, we don't care. Well, here's the secret. Maybe they don't care, but a lot of people
but
do
a lot
care.
of people do.
So we do get inundated by American politics, by American culture, and so when something becomes an issue in the United States, it becomes something that at least Canadians are very aware of, but often end up talking about a lot. The other thing I would say is just through the kind of vagaries of broadcast regulation, we like you get lots of channels, and especially in this streaming era, basically anything that's put out there, either on the internet or on the airwaves, you can end up getting access to that in Canada. But there's still some regulation when it comes to cable, for example, even though the sort of influence of cable television is waning in the streaming age. But for American cable news, almost everybody who's hooked up to cable in Canada, and we have a really high percentage of people who are, they get CNN. They probably don't get MSNBC, and they are very unlikely to get Fox. You can pay extra to get MSNBC or Fox. But really, so for example, on the night of the presidential debates and the vice presidential debate recently, if you look at the ratings in Canada, even though the Canadian networks, including mine, did extensive coverage of it, it was CNN's coverage that might have been the most watched television
among
in Canada.
Canadians. Wow.
Yeah, that night. So there are two things about that. First of all, it kind of underscores the influence of the United States on Canada. But think about the other part of that, right? Where Fox News, for example, in the United States is by far the most watched news cable news channel in the States. And with that comes the influence of Fox News's editorial, orientation, let's call it that.
Sure.
But in Canada, most people are getting their major political American news from CNN. So that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah. So give us a sense of what Canadians are thinking about the current politics in the United States. We are just weeks away from a pretty important presidential election. We have a former president, Donald Trump, running against the current vice president, but that doesn't begin to explain the divisions that are represented, I think, by that ticket and have been represented in the campaign. What do Canadians make of the rise of Trumpism, the division among Americans in our politics, and I guess the seeming sense that maybe we're coming apart in this country in a way that we haven't in certainly decades, if ever.
Yeah. So, we see the extremes here in the coverage. And I just hear a lot of people going like, what is happening? Like how can people believe some of the things that we're hearing them say? And what's it like down there? And what's it going to be like for me when I'm down there for work or, down there on a vacation? And so, yeah, we there's just a lot of questions about it. The other thing is that even though we would describe our parties based on where they are on the political spectrum, are they, right of center, are they left of center? Right of center in Canada, our major right of center party is actually called the Conservative Party. And some people say the leader of that party, who's leading in the polls, they're not the governing party right now. The Liberals, we literally have a party called the Liberals. They are the governing party. They have been for about 10 years.
Yes.
But the polls strongly suggest in the next election, it will be the Conservatives who win. Conservative in Canada, even though some of the harsher rhetoric is creeping into our political discourse and people say, oh, that's the Trump effect. But in terms of policies, what some of the policies the federal Conservatives promote would seem like left of center policies in the United States, know. And so it is a lot different up here. I think we don't always realize how different it is. But to answer your question, I would say a lot of people here just are kind of watching wide-eyed and saying, what really is happening there and what is America going to be like after the election?
That was the CBC's Ian Hanumansingh speaking with Stephen Henderson on Created Equal last week. You can catch and watch the live call-in special hosted by Ian Hanumansingh and Jeremy Hobson at WDET.org. Our WDET newsroom is working hard to cover this election, not just for the presidential election, but statewide and local elections as well. So stay informed and go to our voter guide, WDET.org/voter guide. You'll find information about how to register to vote there.
Looking at the weather, Tuesday, today it's sunny with a high of 77 degrees. Wednesday, mostly sunny, 68 degrees, and windy. We'll see gusts up to 25 miles per hour. Thursday, it will be sunny and 56 degrees. And Friday, we'll have a chance of rain and 62 degrees.
And the Lions host the 1-5 Tennessee Titans Sunday at Ford Field, ESPN reports. The NFL has suspended Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams 2 games for allegedly violating the league's performance-enhancing substance policy. It could not be a worse time for this to happen during the season. However, hopefully the Lions will, they have a deep bench, so they're definitely going to be able to recover from this. But it's just so sad to see that happen to a young player. Hopefully he can recover from that.
Hope so.
Yeah.
General Motors says it made $3 billion in the third quarter despite lower U.S. sales. That's slightly less than it earned during the same period last year, but well above Wall Street estimates.
Coming up, we'll discuss what one nonprofit is doing to train new Americans in the culinary arts. You all stay right there. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent.
Indeed, you are. I always think every time you say it, I just think, oh my gosh, Robin's here. But I'm gonna gush over you later.
So happy to be here with you, Tia.
Yes. And oftentimes, when we're talking and we think about different things and we think about the immigrant story, we think about people coming to a new country for better opportunities and a safer place to grow a family. That's often a scary and intimidating process, and that's why the Patchwork Culinary Project exists. Created by a Soviet immigrant, the goal is to train new Michigan residents in the culinary arts. But Patchwork Culinary Project not only trains and offers certification for culinary work, it doubles as a restaurant that allows patrons to taste the foods of the folks working in the business. Joining us now to talk more about Patchwork Culinary Project is its founder and lead chef, Nick Sanchez. Nick, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So where did the idea come from in the first place? It's a really big undertaking.
It came from being an immigrant myself and starting a restaurant at a young age and, learning how to deal with all the impediments and hassles of opening up a restaurant. So I just figured we having an influx of folks coming into this country, so why not try to set them up for success?
And when you were first getting here, you're young, you're opening up your restaurant. What were some of the things that you were literally learning as you were going? You're just stumbling through. So what are some of the things that you were learning and you were thinking to myself, whoa?
How difficult it is to acquire proper licensing and dealing with all the bureaucracy and all the hurdles that are being put in front of you to open up a business.
Yeah.
So that's the goal ultimately, to just help people overcome those obstacles.
And the restaurant, what's the name of the restaurant?
So the name of the restaurant is the name of our organization, Patchwork Culinary Project.
Nice.
We're still fundraising, like any nonprofit. So there's the previous restaurant's sign is still up. So if you're looking for us driving down the street, look for a Hilton Road Cafe. So, yep.
That one just tickled me a little bit because you talked a little bit earlier. We spoke a little bit, and you talked about how new the project is. This is really, really new for you. December, you're just getting things off the ground. So, just being so new and so fresh with it. What are some of the things and ideas that you all are working to get to? Some of the goals that you guys are working towards? Of course, getting a new sign soon.
Yeah, hopefully. So I did most of the construction with assistance of my dad. I mean, it wasn't anything crazy, but it was enough. So that wrapped up, I want to say, in the early spring. And then we started having some fundraising dinners, which were great because it kind of helped us supplement some of the costs that are going into opening up a restaurant. Because you're not just starting a nonprofit, you're opening up a restaurant as well, which is both on their own are a pain in the butt, but doing both at the same time, it's overwhelming. So we're getting close to being open to the public. Still waiting on a few sign-offs from the city. So even so, as someone who has done it numerous times, I am still having to deal with some of the things that come along with opening up a restaurant. So. Refreshes my knowledge of how to help folks that are going to face that at some point.
Yeah, definitely get into that. If you're just joining us, we're chatting with Nick Sanchez, founder of Patchwork Culinary Project. We're chatting about the nonprofit and its goals for immigrants arriving in Michigan. And, one of the taglines that I saw on the website, immigration built this country. What do you got it on your shirt right there. I love it.
Nice.
Immigration built this country. So, what does that mean to you and to Patchwork Culinary Project?
Well, this country was built by immigrants, whether they came here willingly or not.
Yeah.
So, making it difficult for folks to come here kind of doesn't make sense because that's what this country was built on. So, political obstacles come, and my goal is to try to help them as much as I can in, getting the licensing, getting some culinary training, getting them to open their business. Yeah,
and when you hear people talking about immigration and immigrants, especially the rhetoric we've been hearing in this political cycle in particular, what do you say or think, or how do you feel when you hear folks who are skeptical of inviting new people to the country or having new people come into our country?
It makes no sense because just a year ago they were grousing about having labor shortages, and if you are a private corporation, how about you don't wait for the government to build some infrastructure for folks to learn and train? How about you start on your own? So if you're meat processing or construction,
right,
how about you bring some in, show them the ropes? It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
There's chances are they did something before they came over here chances are some of them might have better education than some of the folks here. So it's just give folks a chance.
And, just because my mind is just like buzzing, because literally some of the things that I had in here for you was just about, folks coming over to the country and this idea that the skills won't match up, or this idea that, there's no translation of this or made that. And it's just like, that's not the case at all. So when we think about the immigrant story, why is it so important to tell it, especially in the way that you are going to shape it with Patchwork Culinary Project?
I mean, just folks that are coming here, they're being dehumanized. And I find that frustrating because, granted, I look like I was born here for numerous generations and my name should be Sam, but my name is Nikita Romanovich Sanchez. So it's like, come on, give folks a chance. Don't just judge them by what they look like.
Yeah.
So,
can you just say your name one more time?
Nikita Romanovich Sanchez.
I mean, what's not beautiful about hearing another language, another culture, another way of hearing and speaking and hearing another name? I mean, just hearing you speak, it was just like absolutely beautiful to hear it. So
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just thinking about, of course, your work, this is a family effort as well. You talked about your father helping you build a little bit as well with the restaurant.
Yep. My mom is helping me too in the kitchen because that's her gig. She's been with me from pretty much day one in the kitchen. So, yeah.
Tell us about the food.
Yes.
Well, so the fundraising dinners were about just highlighting some of the cultures that are newer to our country. And then what we're going to do at the restaurant is pretty much same thing, but make it more, lunch friendly. So sandwiches and things of that nature, but focusing on different parts of the world, folks coming here or folks that did come here in previous generations.
Yeah.
So what parts of the world, what kinds of cuisines can we expect?
So right now, I think I have we are in Metro Detroit, so a shawarma sandwich.
Very
I have
good.
one of those. I think I have a Vietnamese style banh mi. So starting off with, heavy hitters that seem familiar to folks, but as it hopefully goes on, branch out and do some more interesting things that people might not be as familiar with.
I'm looking forward to that. That's one of my favorite things about being in this area, Metro Detroit area, is just the food.
The diversity of food.
The diversity of food and how you can just step into someone else's culture just with the food alone. And it just opens up so many different things that you just didn't know to expect or to experience from that culture, which is this food.
Yes, done authentically and exquisitely.
Indeed, indeed. And before I let you go, Nick, as we get down to the end of the show here, is just about the Patchwork Culinary Project itself and just the importance of having or being that middle person now, or being that space and that place where people know they can come and have a community of folks to help them train up and learn something that can help them in this country a little bit.
Yeah, so we're getting close to. I was able to help a couple of folks, which was amazing, experiencing their genuine gratitude. But I mean, we're still ourselves. Our organization needs help.
Yeah.
So because we're a nonprofit, so it's tough to help folks when you still need help.
Exactly.
So we do we accept donations on our website. So if anyone who's listening wants to check it out, we sell some merch like these cool T-shirts. So or just come to the restaurant. It all goes towards helping us help other folks.
And what's the website?
PatchworkCulinaryProject.com.
Boom. Easy, easy, easy. Nick Sanchez is the founder and head chef of Patchwork Culinary Project. Nick, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro and let us know how all things go.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
That's the Metro for Tuesday, October 22nd. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. The show's also on YouTube if you like listening that way.
This show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, Jack Phil, Branch, Robin, Vincent, and Tia Graham with additional support from Dorothy Jones. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Music's done by Sam Bobian and Will Sessions. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Robin and I will return tomorrow.
Thanks for listening.